They should have left him there. Any sensible soul would have. A wounded cowboy in Apache land meant trouble, blood debt, and the kind of fate no man outruns. But when 3 Apache women found him bleeding in the ravine, they chose mercy over fear, and by their sacred law, that choice bound them to him in ways none of them could undo. Before we ride further into this story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The morning after the gunfire arrived, gray and unmoving, the kind of silence that makes even a shifting boot sound like thunder. The air carried the scent of rain and burned powder. A thin veil of mist clung low to the earth where bodies had fallen hours before, and the horses that had scattered during the night were nowhere in sight, their tracks cutting a nervous path toward the ridge. Harlan stood beside the fence, his rifle resting against his leg, scanning the valley with eyes that had not truly closed. His shirt hung torn at the shoulder where a splintered board had caught him, dried blood stiffening the fabric. He hadn't yet felt the sting of it. His body moved on something colder than fatigue. Behind him, the front door eased open with a slow creak. Nieli stepped onto the porch, wrapped in his coat, sleeves swallowing her hands. She didn't seem to notice. Her gaze drifted to the dark patch of soil where one of the attackers had fallen. "He's dead," she said softly. "Had to be," Harlan answered without turning. His voice carried no pride. "Couldn't risk him crawling back. They will return." He glanced over his shoulder. "Maybe, but not today." Her expression gave little away, yet her eyes held a quiet storm, fear tangled with guilt. "This happened because of me." He faced her fully then. "No, it happened because men like them believe they're owed whatever they can grab. You being here only hurried their excuse." She lowered her gaze as the wind tugged loose strands of hair across her face. "You could have let me go. They would have left you alone." "That's not peace," he said. "That's surrender." Inside, the girls still slept, their small forms curled together beneath one blanket. The shots had woken them in terror. But once the storm passed and silence settled again, exhaustion claimed them. June had asked if her father would survive. Lydia had cried herself to sleep against Nieli's lap while Nieli hummed a low melody from her tribe, soft, aching heavy with memory. When Harlan stepped back inside, Nieli was at the table pouring water into a basin. "You're hurt," she said. "It's nothing." "Let me see." He almost refused. Then he caught the look in her eyes and sat down without another word. He unbuttoned the torn cloth and let her clean the cut. Her hands were steady, careful. He noticed the thin scars circling her wrist again, old marks, the kind rope leaves behind. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked quietly. "My mother," she replied. "She tended the injured in our camp. Hunters, warriors." A pause. Then soldiers came. She did not live long after. He nodded once. "I'm sorry." She pressed a strip of cloth against his shoulder and tied it firm. "You should rest." "I will," he said, "when I know they're gone." Most of that day he remained near the porch, watching the horizon as though he could will it to stay empty. June sat beside him, sharpening tools, mimicking his guarded calm. Nieli and Lydia moved quietly through the house, trying to stitch normalcy back into the hours. Yet every crack of wind against wood made Harlan's hand drift toward the rifle. By noon he saddled his horse. Nieli appeared at the doorway, tension sharpening her features. "You're riding out. Just far enough to see where they went."
"I'm coming."
"You can barely stand." "I can ride," she insisted. "If they return, I must know their faces." He studied her a moment, then handed her his old revolver. "Stay close. Don't use it unless I say." They rode through fields still heavy with rain, hooves sinking into damp soil. The land felt stripped of life. No birds, no distant cattle calls, only wind and the slow creak of leather. At the ridge, Harlan dismounted and crouched beside the tracks. "4 left before dawn," he muttered. "1 stayed." He pointed to shallow impressions near the rocks, boot prints, scattered shells, ash. "They waited here." Nieli's eyes hardened. "They will come back." He didn't answer right away. He knew that breed of pride. Men who retreated only to return louder, meaner. "We'll be ready," he said at last. When they rode back, June and Lydia ran to meet them. June held her composure the way she'd learned from him, but fear lingered in her eyes. "A man from town came," she said. "Sheriff Dalton wants to see you. Said he heard about the shooting." Harland frowned. "He'll ride out tomorrow." That evening the house settled into uneasy quiet. After supper the girls slept early. Yelly stood near the fire, her hair loose and drying from the damp air. Harland leaned against the wall, watching without meaning to. Firelight warmed her features, and for the first time since the attack, her shoulders eased. "You think the sheriff will cause trouble?" she asked. "Dalton's fair. He won't pry if I don't give him reason. And if he asks about me, I'll tell him you're helping here. That's all, and where I came from." He met her gaze. "I'll tell him I don't know. And I don't care." The space between them stilled. "Why do you help me?" she whispered. He drew in a slow breath. "I've seen what happens when no one does." His eyes stayed on the fire. "My wife once sheltered a boy beaten near to death by his father. We fed him, clothed him. One night that father came with a shotgun. I told him the boy stays, or he buries me first. He backed down. 2 months later, the boy joined the cavalry. Never saw him again, but I slept easier knowing he left with a chance." His voice softened. "You remind me of that." Nieli swallowed. "Maybe you are already the man she believed you to be." They said nothing more. When she reached for his hand, there was no hesitation this time. He held on. Later, beneath a sky scrubbed clean by rain, Harland stepped outside. Stars stretched wide overhead. The faint tracks along the ridge were already fading. Maybe those men were gone. Maybe not. But as he stood listening to the steady rhythm of the land, he felt something he hadn't in years, a fragile sense of belonging. Through the window, Nieli watched him, her palm pressed lightly against the glass. Their eyes met in the reflection of firelight, and for once he didn't look away. Whatever waited beyond that ridge, he would not face it alone. Far from the ranch, where canyon walls narrowed into a steep rise of loose sand and fractured stone, 3 Apache women strained beneath the weight of a wounded man. Asha, Leah, and Nomi adjusted their hold as they climbed, Elias's body shifting unpredictably whenever pain jolted through him. Each time he gasped, they steadied him without breaking stride. The temperature had fallen with the sun. Evening wind moved through the canyon in steady currents that urged them onward. The camp lay hidden among willows, near a narrow stream a few miles east, a place chosen for the way the trees swallowed smoke. They had to reach it before full dark. Elias drifted in and out of awareness, vision blurring between the silhouettes of the women carrying him and the shadowed ridges above. He tried to understand why they hadn't left him, tried to speak. Only a dry rasp escaped. Asha glanced down. "We are taking you somewhere safe," she said evenly. "You will not die here." He managed the faintest nod. Leah tightened her grip on his arm as the incline steepened. Nomi matched their pace, breath quickening but resolve unbroken. Questions hovered unspoken. How long had he lain in that ravine? Was someone hunting him? Why had a lone cowboy traveled such harsh ground with no water? Asha noted the worn stitching on his shirt. Leah saw the absence of fresh tracks. Nomi noticed the tears in his boots. They pieced together fragments of a story he could not yet tell. At the ridgeline, moonlight revealed sparse grass and the dark ribbon of trees marking the stream. Relief passed between them wordlessly. They entered their grove through a narrow break in thick brush. Inside stood a small lean-to of salvaged canvas, a fire pit ringed in flat stones, blankets layered over woven grass. Leah moved first, arranging dry branches with practiced care. Nomi circled the perimeter, scanning for tracks. Asha guided Elias down gently onto the bedding. The ground met his back, and for the first time since collapsing, his body sagged. Pain flared from ribs to shoulder, forcing a low groan. "You are safe," Asha murmured. "Do not move." Leah knelt with a leather pouch of herbs and crushed roots. She examined the wound, testing its depth. Elias clenched his jaw. "We clean it now," she said. "If we wait, fever will claim him." Nomi returned with water from the stream. Leah soaked a cloth and began washing away dried blood. Elias hissed at the sting. Asha's hand steadied his arm. He wasn't used to that, being held without force. They worked with quiet coordination, Asha observing, Leia treating, Nomi preparing herbs, strength, precision, vigilance. That was how they had survived. When the wound was dressed and the paste applied, Elias's breathing slowed. "You will rest," Asha told him. "We will watch." He forced out a whisper. "Why?" The sisters exchanged a glance. They did not speak of the law binding them now, of how saving him had tied his fate to theirs until he healed. "You were dying," Asha said simply. "We do not leave people alone in that." His eyes closed, not from fear, but exhaustion claiming him fully at last. Outside, the fire cracked softly. The sisters sat in a half-circle, each carrying the weight of what they had chosen. For the first time in many days, they were no longer alone. And neither was the cowboy. By the third sunrise, Elias could stand without the world tilting beneath him. The fever had broken in the night, leaving sweat on his brow and clarity in his eyes. Asha watched him carefully as he stepped beyond the willow shade, testing his weight against the earth. Leia remained close, ready in case his strength failed. Nomi scanned the ridgeline, ever alert. "You are strong enough to choose now," Asha said quietly. Elias understood what she meant. Their law had bound them when they carried him from death. He could walk away once healed, but he would never truly be untouched by what they had done. "I had no one before that ravine," he admitted. "No land worth keeping, no fire waiting for me." He met their eyes one by one. "If your law ties me to you, then I won't run from it." Nomi's guarded stance softened. Leia gave the smallest nod. Asha stepped forward, calm but certain. "Then you stay, not as burden, not as debt, as husband under our law and protector under your own." The wind moved gently through the willows, no longer carrying the scent of fear. In that hidden grove beneath open sky, 4 lives settled into one shared path, and none of them would walk alone again.